Naomi Carter stood beside the long buffet table, a small untouched plate resting in her hands. Soft light washed over polished marble floors. Crystal glasses chimed. Laughter rose and fell around her. The family reunion was being held in one of the most expensive event centers outside Atlanta, a place designed to look flawless, even when it wasn't. Naomi was in her early 30s, dressed with care but without extravagance. Over the years, she had mastered the art of disappearing in rooms like this. Offer a polite smile, speak only when spoken to, never draw attention. She came because she always did, carrying a quiet hope that this time, somehow, things might be different. Her father, Victor Carter, stood at the front of the hall near the microphone. He was in his late 50s, tall, confident and comfortable, being admired. People respected him. Church leaders nodded at his words. Business partners laughed at his jokes. To them, Victor was a success story. Naomi barely noticed when the music faded. She only looked up when she heard her own name. Victor cleared his throat and smiled, but his eyes were hard. "Before we continue," he said, "I need to address something. Family is about values, about standards." The room went quiet. He turned his head slightly toward Naomi. "Some people don't understand that," he continued. "Some people choose instability instead of responsibility." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Victor went on, his voice growing firmer. He spoke about daughters who were still unmarried, women who couldn't seem to settle down, people who lived off the hard work of others. He didn't say her name again, but he didn't have to. Every face in the room turned toward her. Naomi felt her chest tighten, but she stayed still. "She thinks she's smarter than her place," Victor said, shaking his head. "But confidence without discipline becomes a burden." Whispers moved through the crowd like a wave. Then he said it clearly. "I don't want bad energy here. If you can't respect this family, you shouldn't represent it. Naomi, you need to leave." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Her stepmother, Elaine, stood near Victor. She didn't say a word. She didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved. Naomi's younger half-siblings avoided her eyes, then shared small, satisfied smiles with each other. Naomi waited for her body to react, for anger, tears, something, but nothing came. She placed her untouched plate on the table. She picked up her purse. No arguing, no explanation. She had learned long ago that explaining only gave people more chances to hurt her. As she walked through the room, people pretended not to stare. Some looked away, some watched openly. No one stopped her. Outside, the night air felt cooler. Naomi reached her car and unlocked it. As she sat behind the wheel, one quiet thought rose above everything else. He just kicked out the person paying for everything. She didn't smile. She didn't feel proud. She felt calm. This wasn't a story about shouting or revenge. It was about a woman who had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated for years. And now, without her saying a single word, the world she held together was about to feel her absence. Naomi Carter, the invisible daughter, that was who she had been for most of her life, even when she stood right in front of people. She was Victor Carter's first child, born during his first marriage, back when he still had dreams that didn't revolve around power and control. For a short time, Naomi remembered a softer version of him, one who smiled more, who came home earlier, who spoke gently to her mother. Everything changed when her mother died. Naomi was only 14 when she lost her. One day there were warm hands brushing her hair before school, and the next there was silence. Her father didn't know how to handle grief, so he avoided it. He buried himself in work, meetings, and public appearances. At home he became distant, not cruel in obvious ways, just absent. Naomi learned quickly that her pain made him uncomfortable, so she learned to hide it. People around her kept giving the same advice. Be grateful. Don't complain. Your father works hard. And most often, stay quiet. Naomi learned that speaking too much made people annoyed. Asking questions made her difficult. Challenging men, especially her father, was seen as disrespectful. When Victor remarried, the house felt full but lonelier than ever. Elaine moved in with clear ideas about how things should be. Naomi wasn't mistreated openly, but she wasn't embraced either. She was tolerated. Her needs came last. Her feelings were ignored. Her presence was easy to forget. Victor, meanwhile, grew into a man people admired. He became known as a strong leader, a successful construction business owner, and a respected voice in the community. At church events and business dinners, people praised his discipline and authority. They talked about his values. They said he was a great father. Naomi learned early that the man people applauded was not the man who knew her. To Victor, reputation mattered more than connection. He believed men should lead and women should follow. The quiet intelligence of Naomi unsettled him. Her independence felt like disobedience. Each time she showed confidence, he saw it as a challenge to his authority. Instead of pride, he felt threatened. At 20, Naomi left home. She didn't leave in anger. She left because staying meant shrinking herself forever. She worked small jobs at first, took night classes, and lived in cheap apartments. She learned how systems worked, how money moved, how contracts were written, how mistakes could quietly destroy businesses if no one paid attention. Over time, she built a career in financial compliance and operations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was powerful. She learned how to manage vendor payments, structure event financing, and solve legal and financial problems before they became public disasters. She became the person companies called when something was about to fall apart. Ironically, Victor's business became one of those companies. Through consulting firms and third-party agreements, Naomi began handling important parts of his operations. She organized payments, she fixed errors, she smoothed over disputes. When there were financial risks or legal threats, she handled them quietly, efficiently, and without drama. Victor never asked who was behind the work. He didn't care. As long as problems disappeared and events ran smoothly, he took credit. He spoke proudly about his success, never knowing, or never wanting to know, that his daughter was the reason so many things worked. Naomi never corrected him. A part of her still hoped. She hoped one day he would notice her name on a document, that he would ask questions, that he would see her not as a burden, but as someone capable, someone valuable. That hope kept her coming back. She attended family gatherings. She smiled at reunions. She listened as Victor spoke proudly about family unity. Even when she felt invisible standing beside him, she told herself that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time she would belong. The reunion outside Atlanta felt like it might be that moment. It was big, public, important. Naomi thought maybe finally she would be seen, not for what she could provide, but for who she was. Instead, it became the moment everything broke. Not because she was embarrassed, but because something inside her finally understood the truth. She had spent years holding things together for people who never held space for her. She had kept systems running for a family that never protected her. This wasn't just another disappointment. It was the final fracture, the moment Naomi realized that waiting for acknowledgement had cost her too much already. And for the first time, she began to let go. Victor doubled down on the humiliation, his voice growing louder and sharper as he stood in front of everyone. What started as a few cruel remarks turned into a full attack. He pointed toward Naomi like she was a problem that needed to be removed. "She's been living off my success for years," he said, "taking advantage, contributing nothing." The words stung, not because they were true, but because he said them so easily. Some people in the crowd looked shocked, others nodded as if this explanation made sense. Victor straightened his shoulders, feeding off the attention. He talked about sacrifice, about how hard he worked to build everything. He painted himself as the provider and Naomi as the ungrateful daughter who never grew up. Then he lifted his hand and signaled to the side of the room. "Security," he said firmly. "Please escort her out." The room froze. Two security guards hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but they started moving in her direction. All eyes were on Naomi now. This was the moment people expected tears, anger, or a loud argument. None of that happened. Naomi stood there quietly. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. She didn't raise her voice or defend herself. She didn't explain her job, her role, or the years she spent fixing problems no one else noticed. She learned long ago that explaining only invites more disrespect. She looked at her father one last time. He didn't meet her eyes. Without saying a word, Naomi turned and walked away. The guards slowed down, unsure if they were even needed. She moved through the crowd on her own. Chairs scraped softly. People pretended to check their phones. No one stopped her. No one apologized. Outside, the night felt strangely peaceful. Naomi got into her car and closed the door. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, and for a few seconds she just breathed. There was sadness, but there was also relief. The performance was over. Then her phone vibrated. One notification turned into several. Vendor approvals pending, payment releases paused, access permissions awaiting confirmation. Naomi looked at the screen, her expression unchanged. These messages were not a surprise. Her name was connected to nearly every financial process behind the event. She was the one who approved payments, released funds, and kept vendors calm. Most people didn't realize how many small decisions kept something like this running. Another message came in, then another, a catering manager asking about payment timing, an event coordinator needing authorization, a finance system requesting her approval. The Naomi understood what this meant. The reunion was still going on inside. Speeches were being made, smiles were being forced, but underneath, the system was already slowing down. She had a choice. She could cancel everything. She could send messages explaining the truth. She could expose her father right now in the loudest way possible. She didn't. Instead, Naomi did something quieter and more final. She opened the authorization settings one by one. She withdrew her approval. She didn't block anyone. She didn't send angry messages. She simply stepped back from the role she was never thanked for. Nothing, just absence. Inside the building, the event continued for the moment. People kept talking, music kept playing, but cracks were forming. Payments were no longer moving. Vendors were getting nervous. Questions were starting to rise. Naomi placed her phone face down on the passenger seat. For the first time, she was not fixing anything. She was not rescuing anyone. She was not protecting a man who publicly rejected her. She started the car and drove away. Behind her, the lights of the event center glowed brightly, unaware that the foundation holding everything together had already been removed. The sound system shut down mid-speech. One moment, Victor was speaking confidently into the microphone, enjoying the attention as always. The next, his voice cut out. The speakers crackled once, then went completely silent. At first, people laughed, thinking it was a small technical issue. Someone tapped the microphone. Nothing happened. A few seconds passed, then more. Whispers began to move through the room. At the same time, servers near the buffet stopped refilling trays. Plates sat half empty. Guests looked around, confused. A catering supervisor spoke quietly to her staff, then walked away with a tight expression on her face. Service slowed, then stopped completely. Outside, drivers hired to take guests back to their hotels began asking questions. Payments hadn't cleared. Without confirmation, they refused to move. They stood by their vehicles, arms crossed, waiting. Inside the hall, the mood shifted. Phones came out. People started recording. Others pretended to text while clearly messaging group chats. The smooth, impressive event suddenly felt messy and uncertain. Elaine stepped forward, trying to control the situation. Her smile was stiff. When someone asked what was going on, she lowered her voice but didn't lower her blame. "This is Naomi," she said. "She's always been like this. Emotional, petty." The word spread quickly. Naomi's younger half-siblings didn't hesitate. They posted online almost immediately. Sarcastic comments, laughing emojis, vague posts about grown people throwing tantrums. They never said her name, but everyone knew who they meant. Across town, Naomi's phone started ringing. Not with insults, not with apologies, but with business calls. A catering company manager asked about payment approval. An audio technician wanted to know why access had been cut. A transportation coordinator sounded nervous and frustrated. Naomi answered calmly. "Yes," she said gently. "My name is on the contract." Then, just as calmly, "I'm no longer authorized to approve payments. You'll need to speak with Mr. Carter." Some were confused, some were annoyed, a few apologized. Naomi repeated the same sentence each time. She didn't explain the family drama. She didn't defend herself. She simply stated the truth. Back at the event, panic started to show. Victor was pulled aside. People whispered into his ear. His confident posture stiffened. He asked questions, but no one had clear answers. The event that was supposed to show his power was now exposing his dependence. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Naomi. No, that's what he expected. Instead, it was from vendors asking for approval he didn't have. Victor sent the first message to Naomi himself. It was angry, sharp, full of blame. "What did you do? Fix this now." Minutes later, another message came in. This one sounded different. "After everything I've done for you, you wouldn't even exist without me." Then another. "You're still my daughter." Naomi read the messages slowly. Her hands shook slightly, not because she wanted to go back, but because old wounds were opening. Years of being ignored, controlled, and dismissed rose to the surface. The guilt he trained into her tried to pull her back into place. For a moment, she closed her eyes. This was the pattern. Hurt her, then remind her of obligation. Reject her, then claim ownership. But something was different now. Naomi wasn't fighting the urge to fix things. She wasn't tempted to rush back and save the day. What hurt wasn't the chaos. It was the realization of how long she accepted this treatment just to feel included. The tension was no longer about money or broken systems. It was about a woman finally choosing herself over approval she had to earn by suffering. Naomi turned her phone face down. For the first time in her life, she let the silence speak for her. Reputation damage spreads fast within the community. By the next morning, people were already talking. Church members whispered after service. Business partners made quiet phone calls. Videos from the reunion circulated online. Short clips of the sound cutting out. Guests standing around confused. The event ending early. No one said exactly what went wrong, but everyone felt it. Something about Victor Carter no longer looked strong. The reunion ended before it was supposed to. Guests left early, frustrated and embarrassed. The event that was meant to show success became something people avoided mentioning out loud. Victor felt the shift immediately. His phone kept buzzing, messages from partners asking careful questions, calls from people who suddenly sounded distant. The respect he was used to felt thinner, more fragile. That's when he called Naomi. This time there was no shouting at first. His voice was tight, controlled but desperate. "You need to fix this," he said. "You created a mess and you need to clean it up." Naomi listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. When he finally paused, she spoke calmly, almost gently. "I've been running the financial operations for years," she said. Payments, contracts, risk issues, event financing. Victor went silent. "You never asked who handled it," Naomi continued. "You never wanted to know. You just took credit when things worked." He tried to deny it, but the truth settled in. The strong image he built, the smooth events, the quiet problem-solving, none of it stood on its own. It stood on her. For the first time, Victor understood something he had refused to see. His authority depended on the daughter he belittled. The realization hit him hard, not as regret but as fear. His voice changed. The anger softened into something else. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. "You know how I am. I was under pressure. You're my daughter. We can move past this." Naomi heard the shift clearly. This wasn't an apology for hurting her. It was an apology for losing control. "I'm sorry if you felt embarrassed," he added. "Let's not ruin everything over one night." Naomi closed her eyes. She had heard versions of this before. Small apologies that asked her to return without anything changing. Words that sounded caring but carried the same demand. "Come back and fix it." "No," she said softly. Victor froze. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not fixing this," Naomi replied, "and I'm not coming back." There was silence on the line. She could expose him. She could tell people the truth about who really kept his business together. She could embarrass him the way he embarrassed her. She didn't. That was the twist. Naomi didn't destroy him publicly. She didn't fight for validation. She didn't explain herself to anyone else. She simply walked away. She ended the call not in anger, but in clarity. For the first time, she chose peace over being needed. Behind her, Victor was left with the mess he never learned how to manage. Ahead of her, Naomi stepped into a life where she no longer had to earn the right to belong. Naomi exited all contracts legally and cleanly. She didn't rush. She didn't act out of anger. She followed every rule, signed every document, and gave proper notice. Emails were short and professional. Phone calls were calm. She handed over access, closed files, and stepped away from every responsibility tied to her father's business. There was no drama in the process, just distance. Without Naomi, things didn't fall apart loudly. They weakened slowly. Deadlines were missed. Small problems turned into bigger ones. People who once praised Victor now hesitated before working with him. Some contracts were lost. Others were quietly restructured without his involvement. No one made a public scene. The consequences came quietly, the way truth often does. Victor didn't call again. He knew now that asking her back would require admitting how much he depended on her, and pride still mattered more to him than repair. For Naomi, the silence was strange at first. She started therapy. In a small, quiet room, she spoke about her mother for the first time in years. She talked about being 14 and learning that love could disappear without warning. She talked about growing up feeling useful but not wanted, strong but not protected. She learned something important there. Love without respect is not love. It is control. It is obligation. It is survival disguised as family. Naomi began building boundaries. She stopped answering calls that left her feeling small. She stopped explaining herself to people who had already decided who she was. She learned that saying no did not make her cruel. It made her honest. Meanwhile, the family changed. Without Naomi quietly managing everything, tensions rose. Elaine's influence weakened. She could no longer hide behind smooth events and solved problems. Her words carried less weight. Her control slipped. The family story began to crack. People remembered things differently now. They questioned moments they once ignored. They noticed gaps Naomi used to fill without recognition. Some relatives reached out privately, unsure of what to say. Others stayed silent. Naomi didn't chase anyone. She understood now that being the glue was costing her too much. This is not a story of revenge. Naomi doesn't destroy her father's career. She doesn't embarrass her stepmother. She doesn't correct every lie told about her. She simply stops rescuing people who never protected her. And in that choice, she finds something she never had before: peace. Her days become quieter. Her work is still demanding, but it belongs to her now. Her success is no longer tied to proving her worth to anyone else. She sleeps better. She laughs more easily. She feels present in her own life. Naomi doesn't win by taking something from others. She wins by giving herself permission to step away, and that, for the first time, feels like real freedom. Months later, Naomi hosts a small dinner with friends who chose her. It is nothing fancy, just a warm apartment, soft music playing in the background, and food cooked with care. The table is small, but everyone around it is smiling. These are people who checked on her when she went quiet, people who listened without judging, people who never asked her to shrink. There are no speeches. No one is trying to impress anyone else. No one is competing for attention. They pass dishes, laugh over simple stories, and sit comfortably in silence when the conversation slows. For the first time, Naomi doesn't feel watched. She doesn't feel like she has to earn her place at the table. No one is measuring her worth by her usefulness. No one is waiting for her to fail so they can feel bigger. As she pours drinks, she catches herself smiling for no reason at all. This is what safety feels like, she realizes. Not loud love, not approval given and taken away. Just presence, just respect. Later, when the dishes are done and her friends begin to leave, Naomi stands alone for a moment in her quiet living room. The night outside is calm. Her phone is still. No demands. She thinks back to the night she was told to leave. Being kicked out didn't break me, she thinks. It showed me where I never belonged and where I finally do. The pain didn't disappear overnight. Some memories still hurt, but they no longer control her. She is no longer waiting for someone else to choose her. She already has. This story doesn't end in revenge or applause. It ends in peace, in dignity, in a woman who chose to walk away from what wounded her and build a life that finally feels complete. That kind of freedom, quiet and real, needs no audience. It is enough. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated, feel free to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Until next time.